the US Secretary of War, formerly known as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, is still facing questions over the bombing of a stricken ship in Venezuelan waters. A senior admiral faces questions at a Congressional committee hearing behind closed doors today. Now, Representative Jim Himes, the senior Democrat on that committee, says a closed-door briefing on September's double-tap strike, as it's called in the Caribbean, was one of the most troubling things he's seen. Admiral Bradley told lawmakers there was no kill-them-all order and urged that the video and the records be released publicly. The former Times defense editor Michael Evans told me more.
When you have an operation like this, there are discussions pre-mission between the military commander and his closest aides, and to make sure that all the orders are well understood. This is recorded, so that there are recorded tapes of these conversations, all of which will have outlined what the mission's about, what needs to be done, and what authority they have to do it. There's also a video available of the strike that killed these two survivors. And there are other text messages which were sent to the people who were doing the strikes, which is the SEAL Team 6, who were operating the drones. So all in all, there's a huge amount of evidence that will demonstrate who was doing what and why and what authority was given.
And so, I mean, should the expectation be, and Bradley is giving closed session evidence in Congress today, should it be that responsibility for the killing of the survivors in the Caribbean Sea is going to land very squarely in the lap of the Secretary for War, as he's now called?
Well, the Secretary for War, as you say, gives the broad authority to carry out operations, but very often it's left to the actual commander on the scene to carry out missions as he sees fit, within the parameters set by the Defense Secretary and his military superiors. So it's not easy to say, well, he did this because it was his own choice. He does have the authority to make decisions, but within these parameters. And I think the problem with this whole operation is that there has been a degree of confusion and some bewilderment over whether these actions are legitimate in the first place. That has nothing to do with Admiral Bradley, by the way, who obviously has given his orders and he carries them out. But there is some concern that these operations against these drug boats it veers towards the illegal. Well, that's denied totally by both the White House and the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth, as you know, as the Defense Secretary, has the power to order these things, and he ordered this operation, which is called Southern Spear, and they've had, I think, it's 21 attacks on boats, and more than 80 people have been killed so far.
Okay, and are you right that in the Pentagon, among senior commanders, there's a certain amount of unrest, of dissatisfaction with the way this whole thing has been presented? Can you tell me more about that? What are they upset about?
Well, what they're upset about is the fact that both the Defense Secretary and the White House publicly at a press conference have said the man who was responsible for killing these two survivors was Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley. So basically, if you're a uniformed officer in the Pentagon or elsewhere, you're saying to yourself, great, this is a political operation, if you like, politically authorized operation, and they're singling out the military commander on the scene for taking action, which a lot of people are claiming is the equivalent of a war crime, because instead of saving survivors, you're killing them.
Right. So the high military worry is that the Admiral, he did his job, Mitch Bradley, but the White House and the political masters of the Pentagon are trying to shake off and shirk their responsibility. Well,
I mean, that seems to be what is going on right now. I think there is a degree of resentment about it. And I think Admiral Bradley in particular is, as I say in my piece today, is a highly revered commander. He's been in special forces, special operations for a lot of his life, and I, people regard him as an extremely excellent commander who would certainly not carry out an order if he felt it was a war crime.
Both then the Pentagon High Command and Admiral Bradley himself and the White House and Pete Hegseth are on the same page that the second strike on that Caribbean boat, that could be justified under the law. There, the dispute or the tension is over who takes responsibility for that act.
Well, if the second strike is legitimate and legal and fits with all international laws, then it doesn't really matter who ordered it, whether it's Pete Hegseth himself, and it wouldn't be, that's not how it works, or the military commander, which is what normally happens. Then it doesn't matter, because if they've got justification for this attack, which they certainly seem to think they have, then the argument comes to an end. There are going to be justified reasons, and I'm sure Admiral Bradley will have with him the recorded tapes and other electronic evidence, which will show that he took the decision for the right reasons.
The Pentagon High Command, the admiral who was in charge of the case, the defense secretary, now war secretary, and the White House in its positions in news conferences recently, they all seem to accept that nothing was done wrongly in killing the survivors of the boat. And you say there's documented evidence that might support the case for striking the boat a second time. But the resentment in the Pentagon was with this political row raging, with accusations that crimes were committed. The Pentagon are insisting that the White House and the master of the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, also bear their ultimate political responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the head of the Pentagon, everything stops in your in tray, as it were, and out tray. You're the guy in charge, and you have to take ultimate responsibility. I don't think,
and that's what the Pentagon commanders want to be seen to happen. Now, when it comes to Hegseth himself, he's not in the safest of positions, is he? And there was a leak of that operational information on social media and other things too.
Yes, he's had a pretty rough time since he became defense secretary. He has a certain style about him which doesn't necessarily suit a lot of people, both within the Pentagon itself and certainly in Congress, or particularly amongst the Democrats. But now also, I think some Republicans are also getting a little bit worried about his style of management and leadership. This guy's a very forceful character. He may be a former Fox News presenter, but he's taken to this job in a sort of high-profile way. It wasn't that long ago when you may remember, he addressed 800 generals and admirals who were summoned to the US from all around the world to hear his views about how the Pentagon and all the armed services must become more warrior-like, and in which he actually said that he didn't have much sympathy for rules of engagement, which he felt rather restricted this lethal warrior image that he wanted to portray and to develop. So he is a strong and high personality sort of character. And I think he has had, as I said, a pretty rough time. And there are people, no doubt, who would prefer that he was no longer the defense secretary.
And that was Michael Evans, the former defense editor at The Times.